In early 2025, the Trump administration shocked North America with a move that would send shockwaves through the continent's economy and political landscape. The White House announced a sweeping 25% tariff on a wide range of Canadian goods, from raw materials to finished products, catching businesses and governments off guard. This was no minor tweak, it was a direct hit to the Canadian economy, upending decades of stable trade and threatening the livelihoods of thousands of workers across the country. The move came just after the USMCA expired, leaving a vacuum Trump used to push his America First agenda. With no trade deal in place, the US had a free hand to impose harsh new rules. Suddenly, Canadian cars, steel and aluminum faced crippling new costs to enter the US market, threatening entire industries that relied on cross-border trade. For Canadian producers, these tariffs threatened jobs and billions in revenue. Factories slowed production, warehouses filled with unsold goods, and workers feared for their futures. Ottawa was stunned. The sense of betrayal ran deep. Politicians scrambled to respond as headlines blared news of the escalating trade war. Prime Minister Trudeau's government condemned the move, calling it an attack on a trusted partner and vowing to defend Canadian interests on the world stage. The world's longest undefended border now marked the front line of a high-stakes economic battle as uncertainty gripped both sides. The era of friendly, predictable trade was over, replaced by a fierce and uncertain trade war that would test the resolve of both nations and reshape North America's future. The Trump administration's tariffs weren't random. These were deliberate moves crafted with a clear strategy in mind. They were a calculated effort to force Canada's hand, to shake up the status quo and put pressure on America's closest trading partner. Autos, steel and aluminum were targeted specifically to pressure companies to bring jobs back to the US and to justify the move under the banner of national security. Trump argued that decades of trade deals had hollowed out American industry, shuttering factories and sending jobs overseas. Tariffs, he insisted, would reverse that trend and restore American manufacturing might. The administration invoked rarely used trade laws, claiming even Canadian imports threatened U.S. defense. This was a bold legal maneuver, one that surprised many experts and allies alike. Many, including Pentagon officials, doubted this logic, questioning whether Canadian steel truly posed a risk. But the argument gave the White House the legal cover it needed to act quickly and decisively. With the USMCA expired and NAFTA in limbo, tariffs became a powerful tool, a form of leverage to demand stricter rules of origin, more U.S. access to Canadian markets, and the removal of what the U.S. called unfair Canadian regulations. The strategy was clear: apply maximum pressure until Canada bent to U.S. demands, no matter the diplomatic fallout or economic pain. Trump's view was transactional. America, he claimed, had been taken advantage of for too long, and it was time to reset the relationship on his terms. The tariffs were a high-stakes gamble, betting that the U.S. could outlast Canada in a bruising economic fight, even if it meant short-term pain for both sides. The message was unmistakable: future trade would be on America's terms, or not at all. For Trump, this was about more than economics. It was about asserting American power and rewriting the rules of the game. Canada hit back fast, refusing to stand by as its largest trading partner imposed harsh new tariffs. The response was swift, calculated, and designed to send a clear message to Washington and the world. Trudeau's government imposed $22 billion in retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, matching Trump's move dollar for dollar. The announcement was made with a sense of urgency, as officials scrambled to finalize the list of targeted products. The targets were strategic: products from politically sensitive states, from Florida oranges to Wisconsin cheese and Kentucky bourbon. Each item was chosen to maximize political pressure on key U.S. lawmakers and industries. After the spring election, new Prime Minister Mark Carney doubled down, adding another $22 billion in tariffs, including on U.S. autos and metals. This second wave expanded the scope, hitting even more sectors and signaling that Canada was prepared for a prolonged standoff. Canada's message was unmistakable: it would not be bullied. Across the country, politicians and citizens rallied together, determined to defend Canadian interests and sovereignty. The tariffs aimed to pressure U.S. industries and politicians to push back against Trump's strategy. American workers and business owners began to feel the pinch as exports slowed and uncertainty grew. At home, Canada encouraged a Buy Canadian movement, urging consumers to avoid U.S. products. The campaign gained momentum, with local businesses and shoppers proudly supporting homegrown goods. The result, an escalating economic conflict with both sides digging in for a long fight. Tensions rose at negotiation tables, and economic indicators began to show the strain. The $44 billion in Canadian measures marked the boldest trade retaliation in the country's history. It was a defining moment, one that would be remembered for generations. The trade war was no longer just policy, it was personal, political, and deeply disruptive. Everyday Canadians and Americans alike began to feel the consequences in their daily lives. Both economies braced for impact, uncertain how long the standoff would last, or what the ultimate cost would be. The trade war's impact was immediate and painful for businesses and families. U.S. giants like General Motors faced billions in new costs, threatening jobs and profits. Small businesses lacking deep pockets struggled to survive as tariffs sent shipping costs soaring. Many faced impossible choices: absorb losses, raise prices, or shut down. In Canada, anger fueled a grassroots boycott of U.S. goods. Shoppers left American brands on the shelf and vacationed elsewhere. Cross-border tourism plummeted, hurting U.S. retailers and hotels. For families, prices rose on everything from cars to groceries, stretching budgets thin. Workers feared layoffs as companies reeled from new expenses. The tariffs meant as tough diplomacy became a daily hardship for millions. The once seamless economic partnership now delivered shared pain. The cost of conflict was measured in lost jobs, shuttered businesses, and strained households. With the trade war raging and tensions running high across global markets, Prime Minister Carney met President Trump at the White House in May 2025, a meeting watched closely by the world. The summit was tense. Carney arrived determined not to back down, while Trump demanded major concessions from Canada. Trump touted record tariff revenues to the press, and insisted his hardball tactics were working as intended. Carney countered with evidence that both economies were suffering, showing the real cost of the standoff, refusing to negotiate under threat or pressure. He demanded U.S. tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and other key exports and autos be lifted before talks could progress any further. The meeting ended in stalemate. No joint statement, no breakthrough. Both leaders left entrenched in their positions, the rift between allies deeper than ever before. The trade war dragged on, unresolved and bitter, with businesses and consumers left to pay the price. Diplomacy had failed. The economic standoff continued to cast a shadow. By late August, a surprise move offered hope. Prime Minister Carney announced Canada would lift many retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, a goodwill gesture to restart talks. The most punishing tariffs, however, stayed in place, especially on U.S. autos, steel, and aluminum. The move followed back-channel talks and a call with Trump, aiming to break the deadlock. Trump publicly welcomed the gesture, but core disputes remained unresolved. Business groups cheered the partial thaw, but the fundamental conflict persisted. Canada's strategy: show flexibility, but keep leverage. Washington saw the move as too little, too late. The trade relationship entered a delicate pause, uncertain but no longer escalating. Was this the start of a solution or just a temporary truce? No one knew for sure. As of September 2025, the U.S.-Canada trade relationship remains on edge. The most damaging tariffs, on autos, steel, and aluminum, are still in place, hurting both economies. The Trump administration hints at more tariffs, keeping Canada on the defensive. The next big test: the USMCA review in July 2026, a deadline that could make or break North American trade. Business leaders urge a resolution, warning that failure could unravel decades of economic integration. The lesson is clear: even close allies aren't immune to trade wars. Tariffs meant to protect jobs have instead fueled uncertainty and hardship for workers and families. Trust has eroded, replaced by caution and anxiety. The future depends on careful negotiation and mutual respect, because in a trade war, there are no real winners. The survival of North America's economic partnership is now anything but guaranteed.